What happens when a fashion icon, known for her poise and perfection, gets confronted with questions she absolutely refuses to answer? Well, you're about to find out, because Victoria Beckham's appearance on Today with Jenna and Friends turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments in morning television history. We're talking about a full walk-off, cameras still rolling, audience gasping, and a host left speechless in her chair. Before we get into exactly what was said that caused this explosion, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me which celebrity interview disaster you want me to cover next. Now let's get into what really went down. The segment started innocently enough. Jenna greeted Victoria with the usual warmth you'd expect from morning television, complimenting her recent runway show and asking about her latest collection. Victoria, sitting upright with that signature composed expression, responded with practiced ease about the inspiration behind her spring line, the fabrics she chose, and her vision for modern women's fashion. Everything seemed perfectly scripted, perfectly safe, but Jenna had other plans. See, this wasn't going to be just another softball interview where a celebrity gets to promote their brand unchallenged. Jenna leaned forward slightly, her tone shifting just enough to signal a change in direction. She brought up something that had been circulating in fashion circles for weeks: the criticism that Victoria's latest collection featured price points that seemed increasingly disconnected from the economic reality most women face. A dress from her collection could cost more than some people's monthly rent. Victoria's smile tightened. You could see it, just a fraction of a change. But it was there. She responded that luxury fashion has always been aspirational, that her brand represents quality and craftsmanship, and that women who invest in her pieces are investing in timeless style. The answer was smooth, rehearsed even, the kind of response that usually satisfies interviewers and moves the conversation along. Jenna wasn't satisfied. She pressed further, mentioning that several former employees had recently spoken anonymously about the work culture at Victoria's company, describing an environment where perfection was demanded but appreciation was scarce, where hours were brutal and the pressure relentless. She asked Victoria directly, how does someone who built a career on girl power and female empowerment reconcile those allegations? The temperature in the studio shifted. Victoria's posture somehow became even more rigid. If that was possible, her response came measured but cold. She stated that she runs a professional business with high standards, that the fashion industry is demanding by nature, and that anyone who works with her knows exactly what they're signing up for. She added that anonymous accusations are easy to make and impossible to defend against, and perhaps Jenna should consider the motivations of people who hide behind anonymity. That's when Jenna made the move that would define this entire interview. She mentioned that 3 of those former employees had actually agreed to go on record, providing their names and specific details about their experiences. She asked if Victoria would like to respond to their specific claims, and she started to outline what those claims were. One woman described working 16-hour days during Fashion Week with no overtime compensation. Another talked about being berated in front of colleagues for minor mistakes. A third mentioned a culture where taking sick days was seen as a weakness. Victoria cut her off. Actually cut the host off mid-sentence. She said, and I'm quoting here, "I didn't come on this show to be ambushed with gossip and disgruntled employee complaints. This was supposed to be about my collection." Jenna, to her credit, didn't back down. She calmly pointed out that Victoria's publicist had been sent the interview topics in advance, that workplace culture was listed as a discussion point, and that these weren't just random complaints, but verified accounts from real people. She said that viewers deserved to hear Victoria's side, that this was an opportunity to address concerns directly. Victoria's face did something interesting then. The mask of composure cracked just slightly, revealing what looked like genuine anger underneath. She said that she spent decades building her brand, that she's a businesswoman and a mother and a designer, and that she won't sit there and be lectured about empowerment by someone reading off a teleprompter. The audience let out an audible reaction to that one. You could hear the gasps, the nervous laughter, the shuffle of people shifting in their seats. Jenna's co-host, sitting to the side, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, but Jenna herself remained remarkably calm. She replied that she wasn't reading from a teleprompter, that these were genuine questions based on genuine concerns, and that if Victoria felt ambushed, perhaps that said something about her comfort level with the topic. That response lit a fuse. Victoria asked if Jenna had ever built a global brand from scratch, if she'd ever employed hundreds of people, if she'd ever had to make difficult decisions that affect livelihoods and careers. She said it's easy to sit in judgment when you've never had to walk in those shoes, when your biggest challenge is deciding which celebrity to interview next. Jenna fired back that she'd built a career through decades of hard work in an industry that isn't exactly known for being kind to women, that she'd faced her own challenges and criticisms, and that she wasn't judging Victoria, she was asking her to be accountable. She pointed out that accountability isn't an attack. It's a basic expectation when you present yourself as a role model. The word accountability seemed to particularly bother Victoria. She asked what exactly she needed to be accountable for. treating her employees like professionals, running her business with standards, expecting excellence. She said if that makes her difficult, then she's guilty as charged. But she won't apologize for refusing to accept mediocrity. Jenna responded by saying that there's a difference between expecting excellence and creating a toxic environment, between high standards and treating people as disposable. She mentioned that one of the former employees described crying in the bathroom during lunch breaks because the pressure was so intense. Another talked about developing anxiety that required therapy. She asked Victoria if that's the legacy she wants. People remembering her clothes, but also remembering how the people who made those clothes were treated. Victoria's voice went quiet then, which somehow felt more dangerous than when she was raising it. She said very slowly that she employs people who are passionate about fashion, who understand that creating beauty requires sacrifice, and that if someone can't handle the heat, perhaps they're in the wrong kitchen. She added that crying in bathrooms is not her responsibility, that adults need to make their own choices about their careers. The studio went completely silent. Even the crew seemed to freeze. Jenna let that statement hang in the air for a moment, and you could see her processing how to respond. She finally said that while adults do make their own career choices, employers also have a responsibility to create safe and respectful work environments, and that sacrifice for art shouldn't mean sacrificing mental health or dignity. Victoria stood up, not abruptly, but deliberately, smoothly, the way someone moves when they've made a decision and won't be swayed. She said she thought this interview would be different, that she'd expected professionalism, but clearly she was mistaken. She started removing her microphone. Jenna, still seated, asked her to please stay to continue the conversation, to help viewers understand her perspective. She emphasized that walking away wouldn't make the concerns disappear, that this was a chance to be heard. Victoria replied that she'd been heard plenty, that her work speaks for itself, and that she doesn't need to justify her business practices to anyone, especially not in an ambush interview disguised as morning television fluff. She finished removing her microphone and placed it on the chair. Jenna made one more attempt. She said that this wasn't an ambush, that difficult conversations aren't the same as attacks, and that viewers respect honesty more than perfection. She asked Victoria to please reconsider, to sit back down, to engage with the topic like the strong, successful woman she claims to be. That last phrase, strong, successful woman she claims to be, was apparently the final straw. Victoria turned back to face Jenna, and the look on her face was pure ice. She said that she doesn't claim to be anything. She is a strong, successful woman, and the fact that Jenna would question that shows exactly what kind of interview this really is. She told Jenna that perhaps she should focus on her own career, instead of trying to tear down other women's achievements for ratings. Jenna stood up then, matching Victoria's energy. She said she wasn't tearing anyone down, she was asking legitimate questions that the public wants answered, and that if Victoria can't handle basic accountability, maybe she's not as strong as she thinks she is. The moment those words left her mouth, you could feel the entire studio hold its breath. Victoria laughed, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. It was sharp and cold. She said accountability is a word people use when they want to control you, when they want to make you small, when they can't achieve what you've achieved, so they try to find fault instead. She added that she's accountable to her family, her business partners, and her customers, not to a talk show host looking for a viral moment. That viral moment comment clearly hit a nerve with Jenna. Her expression hardened, and she responded that this wasn't about virality. It was about journalism, about asking powerful people the questions they don't want to answer. She said that if Victoria only wants to talk to people who praise her unconditionally, she should stick to fashion magazines and stay away from real interviews. Victoria's voice got dangerously quiet again. She asked Jenna if she really thought this was journalism, this tabloid-style confrontation based on anonymous sources and disgruntled former employees. She said real journalism requires integrity, something she wasn't seeing much of in this studio. The co-host finally tried to intervene at this point, suggesting they take a quick break and reset the conversation. But both women ignored him completely. They were locked in now, and neither was backing down. Victoria told Jenna that her reaction was proportionate to being disrespected in front of millions of viewers, to being invited onto a show under false pretenses, to being treated like a criminal instead of a guest. Jenna countered that, asking about workplace culture isn't treating someone like a criminal. It's treating them like a public figure with influence and responsibility. She asked if Victoria could honestly say that every single person who's ever worked for her left, feeling respected and valued. Victoria paused at that question. For just a moment, something flickered across her face, something that might have been doubt or discomfort. But then the mask snapped back into place. She said that not everyone is cut out for the fashion industry, that some people discover they don't have what it takes, and that's not her fault. She added that she can't be responsible for every person's feelings or failures. Jenna pounced on that response. She said feelings and failures, as if the two are the same thing, as if having an emotional response to being mistreated is a weakness. She told Victoria that this attitude, this exact dismissiveness, is precisely what her former employees were describing. Victoria's composure was really starting to crack now. She said dignity works both ways, that she deserves dignity too, and that this interview was stripping her of it with every passing minute. She accused Jenna of setting her up, of planning this attack from the beginning, of never having any intention of a fair conversation. Jenna's voice rose then, not quite shouting, but close. She said the only agenda she has is truth, that the questions were fair, that the sources were credible, and that Victoria's refusal to engage says far more than any answer could. She asked Victoria point blank, "Are the allegations true? Yes or no?" Victoria's response came fast and sharp. She said the allegations are one-sided stories from people with axes to grind, that context matters, that nuance matters, and that reducing complex business relationships to simple accusations is intellectually dishonest. She added that Jenna knows this, but doesn't care because complexity doesn't get clicks. Jenna fired back that Victoria was hiding behind complexity instead of giving a straight answer. She said nothing is simple when you're running a business, when you're managing personalities and deadlines and budgets and expectations. Victoria shot back that Jenna wouldn't understand because she's never had to make those decisions, never had to be the one responsible when things go wrong, never had to choose between being liked and being effective. That comment seemed to genuinely anger Jenna in a way that previous exchanges hadn't. She told Victoria not to make assumptions about what she has or hasn't experienced. The difference, she said, is that toughness doesn't require cruelty. Standards don't require suffering. Victoria shook her head slowly, a gesture of dismissal. She said that Jenna was naive, that she lived in a world of theory while Victoria lived in reality. She said if that makes her the villain in Jenna's story, so be it, but history will remember her clothes, not this interview. Jenna responded that history might remember her clothes, but the people who made them will remember how they were treated, and their stories matter just as much. She said, legacy isn't just about what you create, it's about how you create it, who you hurt or help along the way. Victoria's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it carried through the whole studio. She said she's helped more people than Jenna could possibly know, given more opportunities, launched more careers, and she won't stand there and be lectured about legacy by someone whose biggest accomplishment is sitting in a chair asking questions other people wrote. The audience gasped again. Louder this time. Jenna's face flushed, but her voice stayed steady. She told Victoria that attacking her instead of addressing the issues was a classic deflection tactic, and a disappointing one from someone supposedly so accomplished. Victoria picked up her purse from beside the chair. She said disappointment was mutual, that she'd wasted her time, and that she had better things to do than continue this circus. She told Jenna good luck with her ratings, and that she hopes the controversy was worth it. Jenna asked where Victoria thought she was going, that they still had 10 minutes left in the segment. Victoria replied that she was going anywhere but there, and that Jenna could fill the remaining time however she wanted, maybe by explaining to viewers why she ambushes guests instead of interviewing them properly. Jenna said she wasn't the one running away, that Victoria could leave if she wanted, but viewers would see exactly what that meant. She said it meant Victoria couldn't handle being challenged, couldn't handle transparency, couldn't handle being treated like everyone else instead of like royalty. Victoria stopped walking. She turned back one more time, and the expression on her face was something between fury and hurt. She told Jenna that she'd faced more challenges than Jenna had hot meals, that she'd built everything from nothing while people like Jenna sat back and criticized, and that walking away from a bad situation wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Jenna replied that wisdom would be staying and defending herself properly, that walking away just confirmed everything her former employees had said about her being unable to accept criticism or admit fault. She said Victoria had a chance right now to prove everyone wrong, to show she could handle the heat, to demonstrate the strength she claims to have. Victoria's final words before she actually left were delivered calmly, but with unmistakable finality. She said she had nothing to prove to Jenna or to anyone watching, that her career spoke for itself, and that she refused to participate in what had become a character assassination disguised as an interview. And with that, Victoria Beckham walked off the set. Not stormed, not dramatically fled, but walked with her head high and her posture perfect, the same way she'd walk off a runway. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every step as she moved past crew members who pressed themselves against the walls, past the stunned audience members sitting in complete silence, past a producer who reached out as if to stop her but then thought better of it. Jenna stood at her desk, watching Victoria's exit, and for a moment she looked uncertain about what to do next. The co-host was frozen, his mouth slightly open, clearly having no idea how to handle what had just happened. The studio remained absolutely silent except for the sound of Victoria's heels clicking against the floor, each step echoing through the space like a countdown. Then Victoria reached the studio door, pushed it open, and disappeared from view. The door closed behind her with a soft thud that somehow felt louder than if she'd slammed it. That's when the studio erupted. The audience started talking all at once, voices overlapping, some people standing up, others pulling out their phones. The crew members started moving again, looking at each other with wide eyes, clearly unsure of protocol for this situation. Jenna slowly sat back down in her chair. She took a breath, visibly composing herself, and then turned to face the camera directly. Her expression was complex, a mixture of frustration, vindication, and something that might have been regret. She didn't apologize, didn't backtrack, didn't try to minimize what had just happened. Instead, she addressed the audience and the viewers at home with remarkable directness. She said that what they'd just witnessed was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. She explained that the questions she'd asked were legitimate, that the concerns raised by former employees deserved to be addressed, and that public figures, who build brands on empowerment and female success, have a responsibility to live up to those values in how they treat the people who work for them. The co-host finally found his voice and tried to add some levity, suggesting that perhaps the conversation had gotten more heated than anyone intended. But Jenna cut him off, not rudely but firmly. She said, "No, this wasn't just things happening. This was a conscious choice by someone who didn't want to answer difficult questions, who chose to walk away rather than engage with legitimate criticism." She continued, speaking directly to the camera, her voice steady and clear. She said that accountability matters, that we can't pick and choose when we want to be transparent, that building a public persona comes with public responsibility. She acknowledged that her questions had been direct, even confrontational, but she defended them as necessary, as the kind of journalism that holds powerful people to standards they claim to embody. Then she turned to the empty chair where Victoria had been sitting and addressed her absence. She said that if Victoria was watching, the door wasn't closed on this conversation. She said she'd welcome Victoria back, would give her the platform to respond fully and fairly, would engage in a genuine dialogue if Victoria was willing. But she emphasized that dialogue requires participation, requires honesty, requires a willingness to be vulnerable and accountable. The audience had quieted down during this monologue, listening intently. Jenna asked the audience directly what they thought, whether she'd crossed a line or asked necessary questions. A few hands went up, and she took comments from 3 different people. The first person, a woman probably in her 30s, said she thought the questions were fair, but that maybe the tone had been too aggressive, that it felt more like an interrogation than an interview. Jenna listened, nodded, and thanked her for the feedback without getting defensive. The second person, a younger man, said he thought Victoria had revealed exactly who she was by walking out, that if the allegations weren't true, she should have been able to defend herself instead of running away. He said Jenna did what journalists are supposed to do, ask the hard questions that celebrities don't want to answer. The third person, an older woman, said she felt uncomfortable watching the whole thing, that it seemed like both women had let their egos get in the way of a productive conversation. She said she would have liked to hear Victoria's side more fully before judgment was passed. Jenna took all 3 perspectives seriously, responding to each one thoughtfully. She admitted that tone is subjective, that what feels necessary to one person might feel aggressive to another, but she maintained that sometimes comfort has to be sacrificed for truth, that making people uncomfortable is sometimes the only way to get honest answers. She talked about the former employees who'd come forward, acknowledging their courage and speaking out against someone with Victoria's influence and resources. She said their stories deserved to be heard, deserved to be taken seriously, and that walking out of an interview didn't make those stories go away. It just avoided addressing them. She then opened up the conversation to include social media, reading a few comments that were already flooding in from people watching live. Some supported her, calling her brave and necessary. Others criticized her, saying she'd been disrespectful and had an agenda. A few pointed out that both women had made valid points but had failed to actually communicate with each other. Jenna acknowledged that reasonable people could disagree about her methods, but she stood firm on the substance of her questions. She said she'd rather be criticized for asking tough questions than praised for enabling avoidance. She made a direct appeal to her viewers, asking them to think about the workplaces they've been in, the bosses they've had, the times they've felt undervalued or mistreated. She finished by saying that she didn't regret a single question she'd asked, that she'd do it again tomorrow if given the chance, but that she hoped Victoria would reconsider, would come back, would engage genuinely with the concerns raised. She said the offer stood, the platform was available, and that real conversation was still possible if both parties were willing. Then she looked directly into the camera one last time and said that this was the kind of journalism she believed in, the kind that didn't look away from discomfort, the kind that held mirrors up even when the reflection wasn't flattering. Within minutes, clips of the walkout were everywhere. Social media exploded with hot takes. Victoria's team released a statement saying she'd been ambushed, while Jenna's show stood by her completely. The debate raged for days. Some celebrities, came to Victoria's defense, others praised Jenna for asking questions that needed asking. Former employees continued to come forward, their stories gaining traction in the wake of the interview. And through it all, the question remained, who was right? Was Jenna a crusading journalist holding power accountable, or an aggressive interviewer who'd crossed ethical lines? Was Victoria a maligned businesswoman unfairly targeted, or a powerful figure avoiding legitimate criticism? The answer probably lived somewhere in the complicated middle, but that didn't stop everyone from picking sides. That empty chair, that moment when Victoria walked away, became an image that defined something larger than just one contentious interview. It became a symbol of the conversations we're not having, the accountability we're not demanding, the discomfort we're too quick to avoid. So there you have it. The interview that became a walkout, that became a cultural moment. Make sure you subscribe to the channel because trust me, we're just getting started with these stories. And drop a comment below. I want to know, who do you think was in the right here? Jenna or Victoria? Let's talk about it.